Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha. I'm a reporter and analyst for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Excited to be back in my home studio. Excited to go through the Game 4 rewatch, maybe more of the Game 5 adjustments than the rewatch itself, but I have been enjoying these rewatch episodes and adjustment episodes in between the games to talk through what I've seen on film, what I think the Lakers should do, and then get into the Q&A. So format for today is going to be Game 4 rewatch, some quick notes on that, Game 5 adjustments, some quick notes on that, then Austin Reaves and Luka Doncic injury updates, some spicy comments today from Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, and JJ Redick. It's getting to that point of the series. Game 5, we saw at the end of Game 4 some fireworks to close things out, and then it's getting a little testy in the media right now. Then we will get into the Q&A. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all for tuning in. All right, let's get into it. So quickly here, Game 4 rewatch. There was not a lot that stood out on film that I have not already said either in my post-game show or on Lakers Collective earlier today. But I will note, there was a clear difference in the level of urgency between the two teams, which I don't think is a surprise. One team was up 3-0. The other team's season was on the line. That's naturally going to create some desperation on the Houston side. Also coming off of the embarrassment of that blown 6-point lead with 30 seconds left. It could have gone south for Houston. They could have folded and just given up in Game 4. Kudos to them for rallying and having an impressive win. But I think first and foremost, the thing that colored everything for me for this game was the urgency difference. So that really stood out in the film. Fatigue was another thing, and Lakers spoke to that today at practice in terms of the Friday, Sunday portion of Game 3 into Game 4, having an overtime game on Friday, then the quick turnaround that clearly favored the younger, more athletic team in Houston. And then you add in the desperation, the urgency, and you have, I would not say that explained everything that happened in Game 4, but that's the ground terms here for how the battle in Game 4 went. More specifically, I thought the Lakers were pretty sloppy and unfocused offensively. I mean, we could look at the 24 turnovers, which was a series high for LA. They've now had 3 of the 4 games with 20 plus turnovers. They lead the NBA in turnover percentage in the playoffs. They got to cut that down. I think part of that is not having Luka, not having Austin. They've been without their 2 primary ball handlers, 2 best ball handlers, and you've just seen at times the offense has gone haywire. And it's been more so the defense that has carried some timely shots and shot making, but it's obviously been a slugfest for most of this series. But I thought the Lakers, so many basic entry passes getting batted away, some dump off passes, lob passes getting smacked away. It just pretty unfocused offensive performance from LA. And then defensively, I thought there was a clear decline in terms of LA's physicality and them switching as assertively. I think if you go back and rewatch the first couple games in LA and look at the switching that the Lakers were deploying in Game 4, it's back to the passive switching. It's allowing guys to pick the matchups they want. It's not picking up with force, allowing guys to get downhill. And I think they have to do a much better job with Amen Thompson in particular in terms of him getting downhill against certain matchups and LA just not meeting him with the requisite force. So I think that needs to be one of the biggest adjustments going into Game 5. I think looking at the starters, DA, Rui, and Luke, I think this was with DA, it might have been Game 3. I'm kind of in between Game 3 and Game 4 in terms of his worst defensive performance, we'll say. I still think he's been solid to good overall for the entire series. But I thought like DA, Rui, and Luke all kind of stood out as guys who weren't as sharp and weren't as aggressive and physical on the defensive end in comparison to their performances in games 1 and 2. I thought like Rui has, I think, overall been solid for most of the series. I think Amen Thompson has started to get more comfortable in that matchup, and the Lakers are going to have to try and figure that out here over the final game or potentially multiple games of the series. But I think those three guys, and part of that I'm sure is fatigue on some level. Part of it is Houston starting to figure out how they want to attack LA offensively. But I thought those three guys all, if you look at like their game 1 defensive performances to game 4, I think there is a notable decline. But again, part of that I'm sure is fatigue and also the just Houston starting to attack them in different ways. To me, I mean, for as bad as the final score was and the second half was, like this game to me was lost with the stretches of turnovers in the second quarter and then again in the third quarter. And those, like there was a few minute, it was honestly like a 7 to 8 minute stretch total. If you look at a few minutes in the second quarter, 4 or 5 minutes in the third quarter, that's where this game was blown wide open. And so it, like on the one hand for the Lakers, it's not great to get blown out and lose by 19. But on the other hand, it was like they were, I think, much more in this game than the final score dictated. They were only down by 9 at halftime. They did not close the first quarter well. They did not close the second quarter well. They obviously did not play well at all in the third quarter, but there was a couple of stretches there where the turnovers and just not even getting shot attempts up really hurt them and propelled Houston's transition offense, early offense, and just ultimately was the difference. So I think if the Lakers have, I mean, I made this point after the game, if they have 17 turnovers instead of 24, which 17 is still a high number, I think this is a game that's going into the clutch. You get 24 and that leads to 30 Houston points, plus all the fouling, sending them to the free throw line. And that's where Houston dominates the game. In general, I think Houston has ramped up their physicality, and that was something that I anticipated going into game 1. It has not really materialized through the first 2.5 games of the series. It started to ramp up at the end of game 3 and then again in game 4. But the Lakers are going to have to match their physicality. And I think this game 5 is going to be a big test for LA from like with this team playing as desperate as they are right now. It's just, you have to match that. And so I think that's going to be a big thing. And then I also think Houston's started to figure out some things with their offensive identity in terms of playing through Alperen Şengün, around the elbows, at the nail, and then also Amen Thompson coming off of pick and rolls. They've been doing a little bit more horns, a little bit more 3-man actions. That they had some 3-man actions on one side of the floor with Reed and Amen and Alperen, and they're honestly operating in very tight quarters, and that's something that I think the Lakers could do an even better job with, is really testing and swarming them and just being like, we're going to dare you to make some of these reads and to drive through. Because it felt like at times in game 4, like the initial line of defense would be decent and they would sort of shade the ball handler to where they wanted to shade them. And then it would be the help defense or the next line of defense where it's like, all right, Alperen Şengün is being shaded toward the help, then the help's late or the help's non-existent or the help isn't being forceful and he's just powering through and getting to the rim. Or Amen Thompson got to the rim several times that way. And so I think the Lakers got to be sharper in that regard. But looking at Houston's offensive guys, like I think Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson, and Reed Shepherd have all progressively been playing better, have all progressively been looking more comfortable. And I know there's been the stat that's been floated out there of those 3 plus Jabari Smith have played 61 minutes together, that quartet. They're plus 31 in those 61 minutes. So I don't know why it took Ime Udoka so long to get to playing those guys more together. And you know, it's really been Reed that's been he was the odd man out in game 2, and they've been trying to protect him defensively. But I think upon the rewatch, a lot of this is like, I don't think there needs to be any drastic changes from the LA side. It is doing more of what they did the first 3 games. Honestly, playing harder. Hopefully they're not as tired, have just better legs in game 5 compared to game 4. But I do, I made this point on Lakers Collective. I do think game 5 is really important for LA for a multitude of reasons. But I think the biggest one is after game 5, it does shift to every other day. And we've seen, or at least our one reference point between game 3 and game 4, LA looked gassed and just did not have their legs. And if they do not close this out in game 5, now all of a sudden, one game in between game 5 and 6, and you're traveling, one day in between 6 and 7, and you're traveling again. So I do think at that point, the momentum obviously goes in Houston's favor, but it also just starts to be like, can you physically hold up to close the series? And I forgot, like in the first half, remember LeBron took a couple big hits. Marcus had one, took a couple below the belt shots. Luke had one pull up jumper where he was like pulling out his groin. So like already, in addition to the fatigue, you can see guys are starting to get nicked up. And JJ had a comment today at practice where he was asked about, Austin will be a game time decision. Luka's out, but anybody else on the injury report, everybody else available. And he's like, yeah, like all the guys who aren't nicked up right now, will be available. Those guys will be game time decisions. Now, we just got the injury report. Austin is questionable. Luka's out. No one else is listed. But I thought that was kind of an interesting comment from JJ, sort of indicating that there are other guys that are banged up right now. But, Jake obviously had the sprained ankle, but seemingly right now, everyone is at least healthy and available going into tomorrow. In terms of game 5 adjustments, I've already touched on a couple of them, but I think they need to get back to targeting Şengün in the pick and roll more. I thought they kind of went away from that in game 4. And what they really tried to do, and this was, I think, a smart tactic from Houston, was they put Reed Shepherd on Rui, and the Lakers really tried to force feed the Rui matchup, because when Reed has been on Marcus or on Luke, the natural thing there is LeBron get the ball, Marcus or Luke go screen for LeBron, try to get that switch with Reed, or maybe you slip it, maybe you pop, but also Marcus and Luke can they are on ball initiators and creators, so there's just like a flexibility in that of the inverted pick and roll and drawing that mismatch. With Rui, it's a little bit different because Rui is not the same level of shot creator. He's not the same level of ball handler as those guys. So Rui's options are a bit more limited in terms of, he can pop, which they were doing some of that, but the Rockets, the defenders were able to either switch that or kind of stunt at LeBron and show him 2 and then recover out to Rui. Rui does not have like the quickest release necessarily. So you can, if you time it right, close out to him. And then also he's not like with Luke, he's going to, he's been able to get downhill, take a 1 to 2 dribble pull up and really create that separation. With Marcus, he's been able to get downhill, get to the rim, or maybe drive and kick, dump off, throw the lob, whatever. With Rui, it's a little bit more of a, he's more, I would say he's a little stiffer in his movement. So it's a lot of just like catch, rip, and like maybe take a 1 to 2 dribble pull up, which he's automatic with that shot, but it often is a contested shot. There have been some instances in which he's been able to create the separation, but I think point being, like, if they keep Reed on Rui, I think there are other ways to try to attack him. I think Rui should be getting out in transition and trying to deep seal post up against Reed, which he's done several times in the series. And that's been more of like a cross match situation. But if Rui could get him deep in the post, that's where Reed, it even happened in game 4 early. Reed had to foul him. Like he's too big for Reed in the post. But I don't think they should shift their offensive priorities to all of a sudden being like, well, we need to force feed Rui or on the block, or we need to force feed Rui in the pick and roll as a roller or a popper. I think that threw off the flow of LA's offense. It should be continuing to target Şengün and maybe doing some off-ball actions to get Reed switched on to other guys. And then, like, if you can do some sort of split cut or off-ball screening, pin down, whatever, to get Reed onto Marcus or onto Luke and then bring them into the action for LeBron, I think that's the smart way to do it. But I thought Houston, and this is something that I'm surprised it took them this long to do it. Maybe I'm not surprised it took, Houston's been very slow in the adjustment front throughout the series. But even go back to last year, remember, like, teams, because they were in impossible decisions with who do we put on Luka, who do we put on LeBron, who do we put on Austin, a lot of times they would just be like, all right, our worst defender, we just have to put him on Rui because we have to put our best defender on Luka. We have to put our biggest defender on LeBron. And then the next best guy we have to put on Austin. So it's like Rui just, by process of elimination almost became the guy where you would hide the duck, you would hide the smaller guy. And the Lakers, I think, did a better job of countering that last year than they have up to this point this year. So I think it was a smart tactic from Houston to get LA thrown off their game and get them trying to force feed someone who's not naturally in that position. I like Rui way more as a spot up guy or as a guy attacking from the weak side. If you're involving him too much in the middle of the action, I think there are some limitations there, as we saw in Game 4. Then defensively, I think the Lakers have to swarm Şengün. Şengün is just catching the ball 18, 20 feet out and just working his way. And he is bashing through the initial line of defense, bashing through the next line of defense. And there's some offensive foul stuff that we'll see if he starts to get called for in Game 5 with it not being in Houston. But even with that, like, I think we saw, for example, a couple times where LeBron, like Houston would try to come from behind on LeBron and poke the ball loose, swipe at LeBron, and sort of sneak attack, surprise him. I think the Lakers could do the same thing to Alperen Şengün and do a better job of that. Of, okay, Şengün is going to be working Jackson or working DA with the off arm and doing his little herky-jerky post-up stuff, but come from behind and try to poke the ball loose and really swarm him. And I think they need to do a better job of, on those post-ups and ISOs, really just shifting the entire defense like into attacking him. You got to be careful with the back cuts, right? And there's a balance there in terms of where you help from. And it is tougher to help from the middle of the floor, which is why Houston is using that as the entry point. But I think that they got to swarm Şengün more. And they also they have to pick up Amen Thompson higher on his drives. Houston is setting these screens, and this is what they did in the regular season against the Lakers. They're setting the screens at the free throw line or below. And if you give Amen Thompson, especially if you're going under him, if you're going under the screen, if you're going under the screen, you're giving him a runway, and he's also now getting the screen at the free throw line or lower. He just has to take a dribble or two, and he's gliding into and knifing through the paint and getting to the rim. And I just think we saw too much of that in Game 4. So I understand LA going under at the 3-point line or even inside the 3-point line a little bit. Once you get to the free throw line, it's got to either be a switch or you got to be going over. And that guy, if they're in drop, if it's DA, Jackson, whoever, it's got to be like at that point, it's not as much of a low drop. It's got to be a higher drop. And that guy has to be meeting Amen Thompson at the level when they're that low and deep into the paint, because I thought there's just far too many mistakes on that of going under, you're giving him a runway and the help's late, and then he's just coasting to the rim, and the Lakers got to be better with that. I think the only two, now within all this, right? So you're setting more help to Şengün, you are picking up Amen Thompson a little bit higher, more attention toward him. The only two guys I'm not helping off of are Reed Shepherd and Jabari Smith. Everybody else, Tari Eason, shoot as much as you want. Josh Okogie, shoot as much as you want. Aaron Holiday, Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, whoever wants to shoot. Like, Tari Eason has had a couple of decent shooting games, or I would say a couple of good shooting games. Aaron Holiday looked better in Game 4. That's fine. Let them shoot. Let them all shoot. The two guys you don't help off of are Reed Shepherd and Jabari Smith. Then again, offensively for LA, I think more horns and stack actions. Houston has really struggled with back screens, and especially now that they're switching more and sending more attention toward the ball and ball pressure. You saw DA have a big game where he was getting guards switched. I mean, there were several times Reed switched onto him, and just several times he's swarmed by Şengün is out, so then and maybe Jabari is brought out as well, and now it's DA going up against Okogie or DA going up against Holiday or Shepherd or even Amen Thompson, and he should win that matchup more often than not. So with that, and also some of the back screens, there was one for a near lob attempt for Jackson that he got fouled on, another one where he just missed the lob. But some of those, I just think some more middle of the action actions middle of the floor actions for LA, just because they, I think, started to play far too much side to side and in not really piercing the teeth of the defense enough. So I think that's something they could go back to that they did a better job of in the first couple games in the first half of Game 3. I think Austin coming back just his availability would help a lot, but him bringing the ball up the floor, him initiating pick and rolls, him getting downhill would be a big boost for the offense and take a little bit off of the plate of Marcus and Luke and LeBron and allow those guys to play a little bit less, be a little bit fresher, and just give more during their time on the floor. And then from a rotation perspective, I think the Lakers have to try to stagger Jackson and Alperen Şengün. Jackson had one good game against Şengün defensively. Otherwise, he has been minced meat, and he's just it's just foul city, and it's bringing out some of the worst. Game 4 was particularly egregious, but it's bringing out some of the worst traits in Jackson, where his frustration with the refs, I think, is undermining his game right now. So I think they got to try to stagger that and have Jackson play against some of the small ball looks. I think they prefer DA against the small ball looks because then he could really eat offensively, but to give DA a break and to make Jackson more viable in the series. There's also an element, I guess you could say, Jackson against Şengün in the pick and roll, right? Like Jackson is a lob threat, but I just think Şengün has been just destroying him in the paint, and that has something that the Lakers have to adjust to. And then I think more Vando. I continue to say this. I said this after game 1. I've said this after every game. I think Vando should be at least the 7th man, if not potentially the 6th man. Now, I'm not saying play Vando like 25 minutes. I guess if Austin's coming off the bench, more the 7th man, but Vando, I think, should be pretty consistently in that like 18, 20 minute range. I don't think JJ will play him more than that, but I think he should be playing more than Jake. I think he should be playing as much, if not slightly more, than Jackson. And I just think in general, the Lakers could use a little bit more Vando. And then in terms of injury updates, Austin Reaves practiced today, and he spoke to the media at practice for the first time since his injury on April 2nd. ESPN reported that there's optimism within the Lakers that he will play in Game 5. He's been a game time decision and listed as questionable going into Game 3 and Game 4. I had said going into Game 3, I was skeptical that he would play in Game 3, that it would probably be 4 or 5. Looks like 5 right now is the most likely scenario, but we'll see how he feels. He said he's going to see how he feels in the morning. He's going to go through his pregame warmup. Then they will decide whether he's going to play. JJ did not clarify if he'll be on a minutes restriction. He said it'll depend on what they decide between the coaching staff, the medical staff, and Austin. And then Austin said that he's been pretty miserable watching from the side and not playing. So he's itching to get back. He said he's exhausted every resource and avenue to try to get back as soon as possible. And there's like a pain tolerance threshold right now for him to deal with in terms of playing. But the key is basically he just does not want to re-injure it or make it worse. And that's what they're trying to figure out in a way. But it does seem like it's trending toward him making his series debut tomorrow. And then Luka Doncic, I'm still a little confused on this one because there was a report today from ESPN that he's expected to miss the rest of this series, which I think has been the way that this is trending. I mean, for him to not miss the rest of the series, he'd have to return at some point this week because Game 7, unless the series could end tomorrow, obviously, but if the series goes to 6 or 7, it would either be Friday or Sunday. And at this point, Luka's not even started doing one-on-one work. So him returning this week, I think is clearly off the table. But there was kind of a glitch in the video because I watched the clip that of Shams talking about it, and there was almost like for those who watched it, I'm sure you saw it, like there was almost like an audio glitch kind of when he talked about Luka potentially missing the full series because that has been what's been aggregated. That's what's been out there, that he said that Luka is going to miss the full series, but it almost felt like there was part of the clip that got like cut out or sped up, or like there was some sort of glitch there where it didn't really, at that point specifically, it sounded like he said it, but it didn't seem like a clear sentence. It just seemed like something got messed up in the video. So I'm not quite sure if he meant the entire series or just like the start of the series, but that is noteworthy. Obviously, if he's going to miss the entire second round, I think that's a huge blow to LA. I've stated I think they need some version of close to the best version of Luka to win this series and pull off the upset against OKC. But so Luka's now about to hit the 4-week mark, similar to Austin. technically the 30th is the 4-week mark. That's on Thursday. If he misses the entire second round, that would be him. I mean, depends when the second round starts and how long it goes for. But that would be about 6 weeks. So that would be on the high side, or like kind of him being out for the entirety of the typical grade 2 hamstring timetable. Now, just because there's a like projected or typical time frame for someone to miss, it just depends how the hamstring is doing with the increased workload. And he has started doing movement stuff on the court, but he has not been able to hit some of those checkpoints yet of the one-on-ones, then the group work, and then eventually being able to scrimmage and play 5-on-5. So this week, and the Lakers, I mean, if the Lakers win tomorrow, I think the OKC series is going to start on the weekend, would be either Saturday or Sunday. So it doesn't seem like he's going to be available to at least start the series, but could he potentially be back for at some point mid to late series? I think that might be, it seems to be optimistic right now, but we'll see. I just think, there had been some optimism that he might be back at some point in the first round a couple of weeks ago. That's obviously now no longer the case, but it does feel like it's a little surprising if he does end up missing the entirety of the OKC series. Now, if LA goes down 2-0 or 3-0, maybe there's a chance he could come back, and they just don't want to risk it because they view the series as potentially over at that point. But I think we'll see. I think the key thing to track here is going to be probably early next week. Where is he at in terms of, has he started the one-on-ones? Has he started the group workouts? If he's there, then it feels like he could maybe return middle of the series at the earliest. If he's not, and it's still very limited on court work, then I think that tells us where Luka's at. But I'm not quite sure what to make of the report today, just because it did seem like, I don't know how else to put it other than it felt like there was like a glitch when he was talking about that. And maybe it just wasn't an audio or video issue, and it was as simple as that. But if he is going to miss the full series, that's obviously a big blow for LA. And then wanted to quickly touch on some of the spiciness that we had today from both sides. So you had Alperen Şengün saying he expects the Lakers to be more physical in Game 5, and they're ready for it, and they're ready to hit the Lakers. He also said that they are the younger team and that they would heal faster than the Lakers. So Şengün just kind of putting it out there already that he's expecting a war in Game 5. Jabari Smith, he of the egregious turnover with 25 seconds left in Game 3, came out and said that the Rockets are clearly the better team compared to the Lakers, which is an interesting comment when you're down 3-1, but he made that. So we'll see if the Rockets can back that up tomorrow. And then JJ also had a couple of comments today where he talked about killing the Rockets, not literally, but just saying that to close out a series, you have to kill the team, and that human nature is that the team is going to, survival instincts kick in and they don't want to be killed. So you have to take it from them, right? Like you have to beat them. And then he also was relayed, I think, part of Şengün's comment about Houston being ready for LA's physicality and Houston being the younger team and being able to heal quicker. And JJ dismissed it and said, well, we're up 3-1 in the series. So he was not asked directly about Jabari Smith's comments, but it seemed to at least be aware of some of the stuff that's been coming out from the Houston side recently, and kind of poo-pooed it a bit of like, hey, you guys keep talking, but we're up 3-1, and that's more important than anything you say in the media. So I love this point of a series. It does feel like the bad blood has been boiling here between the two sides. We saw it spill over multiple times in Game 4, including at the end of the game when both benches cleared out and there was whatever was going on in the middle of the floor. And then that led to fines for Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard. And I know the Lakers were really frustrated with the refereeing. I know many of you were very frustrated with the refereeing. So spotlight on Game 5. And just I think it'll be interesting to see how both sides handle the pressure, but also I think we will see increased physicality and could lead to a couple of tense moments, we'll say, in Game 5. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. Before we do, a quick break and shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Cozy Earth. A quick shout out to Cozy Earth for sponsoring today's show. I'm on here talking basketball, watching games, looking at numbers, grinding film. But what about when you need some downtime? You want to be comfortable. You want to be cozy. And that is where Cozy Earth comes in. They got robes and slippers built for all those quiet moments, like relaxing after a long work day or just kicking back and watching a game. And with Mother's Day coming up, this is actually a great gift idea because it's not just a random gift. It's something that she's actually going to use every day. The robes are super soft. They have multiple styles, and the slippers are built to be worn all day, not just around the house for a few minutes. And the best part is you can try it risk-free. They have an 100-night trial and a 10-year warranty, so you're not really taking a risk here. And so if you're looking for a thoughtful gift for yourself or a mother in your life, go to cozyearth.com and use code BUHA for 20% off. That's code BUHA for 20% off. And if there's a survey after you check out, just let them know you came from the show, Buha's Block. Because at the end of the day, home starts with mom. All right, let's get into the Q&A here. Appreciate the patience. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. What questions do you guys have? I see Kevin Cambridge wants me to bring back my original show sponsor that I had for a couple episodes. Mishra notes the better team doesn't lose 5 in a row. Great point. The Lakers had beat the Rockets 5 times in a row. And you could say like the Rockets had an insane collapse in Game 3, but I mean, that's part of their DNA. And it felt like they were going to have one of those at some point in the series. So, yeah, I mean, there's really no evidence to suggest that the Rockets are the better team right now. Sarah Talks Ball. Shout out to Sarah. Will you be there tomorrow? Where are the media seats now? Yes, I will be there. I will be at every home playoff game. TBD right now on the road games. It was out of town for my son's birthday for games 3 and 4. But I will be there. New media seats are in section 117. So as a beat writer, I was in section 114. As a not beat writer, they put me in section 108, which is the visiting side section. And then they actually got rid of section 108 in terms of that being the media seats and moved us to 117 now. So I'm in 117. Advantage, it's like a little bit further back, but we're talking first world media problems here. But you do have a vantage point of the bench. So I think I'm able to pick up, because typically like 114, you're opposite the Lakers bench and the basket's kind of in the way. 108, you're on the visiting side of the arena, and then like the basket's in front of their bench, but then you're also diagonal from the Lakers bench. I'm at least from the vantage point like behind the Lakers bench, so I feel like there are subtle things you could pick up in terms of guys interacting with each other, what's going on in the huddle. So that's one of the things I like about the new seats. But yeah, I will be there, and I will be there the rest of the way. Sky Falcon 5, how do you attack the switching, especially if Braun doesn't have it going off the dribble tomorrow? I think the way to do that, or part of the way to do that, is I like some of the stuff with using Rui as a screener on the sidelines a little bit more, not as much like high pick and roll, but there were some times where they were able to cause some confusion or a moment of hesitation with Houston on kind of like the slot area, like on the wing and lower. So I think you can have, in this case of if you're specifically talking about LeBron, I think you can have Marcus or Luke screen for him and draw the switch. You could have whoever Reed is defending come screen for him and try to draw the switch, or that guy can slip out. And then I think it's a little bit different if they're slipping out. Like Rui can slip into the corner, which there was one instance in which that happened, or he could slip for a little midi. But I think the way to attack the switching is through ball movement and actions. I think the worst thing that you could do with switching, and the Lakers have done this for several years now, they have struggled with switching, like a couple, different coaching staffs, different teams, different personnel. Just one of the things that the Lakers have tended to do when teams switch a lot is go mismatch hunting and playing iso ball and settling for contested jumpers, late shot clock situations. And so I think you need to continue to run the offense. There can be an element, I think, especially with Reed or Şengün in the pick and roll, where you are mismatch hunting, you are attacking certain guys. But I think the key to it is to find the right balance with it. But also, I think with LeBron, for example, like they started to blitz him a little bit, and there was a couple times it caught him off guard. And one time he tried to pass over it, one time he tried to dribble through it, and both times resulted in turnovers. So I also think with LeBron, they could do a better job of, maybe it is more Marcus, Luke, and then potentially Austin, or if Austin doesn't play, it's Bronny. Like they're the ones handling the ball against the initial line of defense, and then it's finding LeBron in the post, the elbows, or I would like to see, as I said in my Game 5 adjustments, some more horns and stack actions. But I think it's continuing to run your offense and try to attack and find the gaps more naturally within the flow of things, rather than trying to force feed certain things. Now, if you can spam it and just get a bunch of Reed Shepherd switching onto LeBron, okay, sure, like go with that, right? But I think Houston's done a better job of preventing that switch, and that worked earlier in the series. But now that it is not working as much, or at least like that direct action working as much, you need to get a little bit more creative. And I talked about it a little bit earlier too. Like if there are ways to get Reed switched on to other guys and then bring that guy into it, like specifically Marcus or Luke, guys who are more natural partners in terms of their shot creation, ball handling with a LeBron in a pick and roll situation. Or of course, if you can get a deep seal post up against him, DA, Jackson, Rui, whoever, those are ways to attack it. But with the switching, I think the worst thing you can do is just start to stagnate and try to play too much iso ball. I think you need to keep your zip and pace within the offense, continue to run more actions, and then organically there will be a breakdown, there will be a gap, there will be a situation you could exploit. But I thought that the switching definitely hurt that, because I think a big thing here is like when they're in drop, you could obviously get downhill, and that's when you could attack Şengün in the pick and roll. But I thought they're doing a better job of switching, being more aggressive. They also fought through screens, I thought, pretty well in Game 4. That's another big thing for Houston. So that would be some of the things. But I think with LeBron, what you don't necessarily want to be doing, like you don't want to invite the same thing that the Lakers do with Kevin Durant, where he's like asking for a screen 35 feet out, and all of a sudden they could send 2 to the ball. And the Lakers have been able to attack out of that, but it wasn't as sharp in Game 4. I think it'll be better in Game 5, but I think you just continue to run the offense. Next one from Mission 86 Performance. Thank you for the super chat. Been listening for a couple months, just saying hi and thank you for everything you do. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That means the world. I'm glad that you joined the Late Night Gang a couple of months ago. I hope you stay for a while, and I'm glad you've been enjoying yourself. It means a lot. Next one from Judge105. Thank you for the super chat. You might have talked about this. How do we reintegrate Austin without upsetting the current balance of the team, especially the way Luke is playing? So I think the way to reintegrate Austin is going to be bringing him off of the bench, and he'll likely be on a minutes restriction. So I think it makes it a little bit more of a seamless process. I think if the Lakers close out tomorrow, tomorrow I'd expect Austin, if he plays, to come off the bench, I looked at his So the last 2 times he's returned from injury, he's come off the bench. With one of the times, it was just one game. Then he returned to starting. That second time, after he missed a more extended period with the calf injury, he came off the bench for several games and then eventually returned to starting. So with the stakes of the playoffs, I would assume that it would be like 1 or 2 games. I don't think he's going to be coming off the bench for too long. But I think for tomorrow, if he does play, it would probably be off the bench somewhere in the mid-20s. Knowing JJ, he's probably going to try and push that as far as he can. So maybe it's like a 25-minute minutes restriction that gets pushed to 28, or he just plays Austin 28, something like that. But I think that's the way to do it. And then you can also, I think there are pockets there where, especially late first quarter into second quarter, late third quarter into early fourth quarter, where Austin will help with some of those groups. Because I think the Lakers have had some stretches in this series where they have not closed quarters well. And so I think Austin could help with that and then fit into some of the bench groups to start the second quarter, start the fourth quarter. So I think that's like the most natural way to try to do this. I would be surprised if they just insert him into the starting group and he's playing like 35 minutes in game 1. I know this is more of a pain tolerance thing, so maybe the minutes restriction is a little bit lower, but it was a rib injury that did, he's said he feels like he's in pretty good shape, pretty good conditioning right now, but it is tough to miss a month of basketball and just return to a playoff environment and just go like guns blazing back to starting 30 plus minutes. Like it's possible. I'm not saying it's entirely off the table, but I think at least based on the way they've handled his last couple of injuries this season, he has come off the bench, been somewhere in the low to mid 20s from a minutes perspective. Maybe with it being the playoffs, that's ramped up a little bit. And then in terms of where the minutes come from, I think Marcus and Luke will each have a few minutes shaved off. I think Bronny's played well, especially I thought he played well in Houston, but maybe he gets phased out entirely. And then I could also see a little bit less minutes from Jake, potentially even Vando. And it's like more 4 or 5 guys lose minutes, and all those minutes go to Austin. And everyone's a little bit fresher, but maybe Rui also play a little bit smaller depending on the pocket of the game. I think you get away with it against the bench groups. When they go small, you can't get away with it, I think, as much against like their primary lineup. So that's something that JJ and the coaching staff are going to have to figure out. The one thing I will say with this last part of this question is I think it was a much trickier discussion coming off of game 2 than game 4. Like Luke did not play as well in game 3, and then especially in game 4. I expect him to play better in game 5. So I think probably if the Lakers win, which right now I do think they're going to win tomorrow, I would expect it to be Austin comes off the bench, he plays the mid-20s or whatever the minutes are, and then going into game 1 against OKC, which would, if tomorrow's Wednesday, probably again be something like Saturday or Sunday. I think maybe Sunday is the safest bet right now. Sunday game 1, I think by that point Austin has been back for 5 days, and he probably goes back to starting, and I think it will be in place of Luke. Now, if the series gets dragged out and it goes to a game 6 or a game 7, I think game 6 he's probably coming off the bench. Game 7, maybe they shift it toward him starting. But I think for at least this series, I think it would be like the next game and then maybe one more game with him off the bench. Then maybe they close the series with him starting. I think if they do close this out in 5 or 6 by game 1, he would probably go back to starting. I mean, it's like, I think, to be clear, like Luke should still, if Luke is the one who does move to the bench, which again, I think just based on the roles and the matchups, I think Luke would be the one to move to the bench. I still think he should be playing like high 20s, if not low 30s. And he still played a big role. Like the minutes will naturally go down because they just go down when you move to the bench. But I think there are still ways to really involve Luke and make sure the minutes are higher than they were in the regular season when he was coming off the bench, and he's more involved in the offense, especially with Luka potentially out to at least start the next series, if not potentially the entirety of the series, right? So I would say I don't think it, like, to me, Austin, if you go back to when Austin came back from the calf injury back in early February, remember, like, part of what caused some of the conversation with the whole second option versus third option was initially, I mean, if we take it back to the beginning of the season, right? Like, LeBron misses the first 14 games. So over that span, Austin is the number 2, but even the number 1, because remember, Luka gets injured after the first 2 games of the season, misses a few games, and Austin then, he has the 51-point game in Sacramento and the Minnesota game. And like, so Austin's between the number 1 and number 2 without LeBron. Then LeBron comes back, and LeBron, to his credit, assimilates and is the number 3 more so to start, his portion of the season. And I think it starts to shift a bit in December. Austin also suffers the first calf injury, then he suffers the second calf injury. And like, I think his role in usage starts to decrease a little bit. LeBron's ramps up. Then LeBron's ramps up from that like late December into January. And LeBron is now clearly, the number 2, but even you're playing at a really high level. And then eventually Austin returns. He's coming off the bench. But then it starts to, the seesaw starts to shift the other way, where now Austin's becoming more of the number 2. He's not doing as well in the number 3 role, but then it brings back like, okay, who should be the number 2? Who should be the number 3? The Lakers, like JJ comes out and says LeBron basically should be 3rd in usage, and we're at our best when it's Luka 1 and Austin 2. And then that kind of leads to the rearrangement. But I mean, Austin was in that number 3 role for several weeks. So I think you can like integrate him into whatever role you want him to be. I think the big thing is just going to be what is his conditioning like, and what is his shot like? Because if I think there's been, in my opinion, the criticism of Austin's been a little overboard with some of the playoff stuff, but the one area he has struggled mightily the last 2 postseason series has been with his shot. In terms of his 3-point shot specifically. Actually, the mid-range shooting has been solid. The 2-point shooting has been solid. But the 3-point shot has deserted him the last couple of series. So I think if he is playing a little bit more off the ball, I think LeBron will be the number 1 and Austin will be the number 2, at least through this series. But I think probably going into OKC as well. Like Austin will probably handle the ball more, but LeBron will, I would assume, lead the team in usage and points and whatnot until Luka's back. But I think Austin has a shape-shifting element to his game where, I mean, for most of his career, he's been a role player. He's been an off-ball guy. He's been more of a shooter or secondary guy. And then it's really been like the last year and a half where the Lakers have shifted his role into being more of a true number 3 or even a number 2 at times. So I don't really have many concerns with how Austin is going to fit in. I think the biggest thing is just what physical state is he in coming off of a near month-long absence and being thrown into the crucible that is the playoffs. And then also, where's his shot at, right? Because I think that's one area with him that has been up and down. I think he found his shot midway through the season, but it has been up and down at times in the regular season, and it's certainly been down the last couple playoff series. And that's something I'm going to be monitoring with him. Also should note, I see a couple people talking about it in the chat, that Kevin Durant is officially out for Game 5. So I'm retroactively putting that in the injury updates segment. I mean, I don't think it's a surprise. They said that this injury typically is a 2 to 3 week timetable, but maybe there's a chance he returns for a Game 6 if there's a Game 6 or a Game 7 if there's a Game 7. But they've been playing fine without him. Guillermo says Bron is not going back to number 3. I agree. I don't think that. I think LeBron will be ahead of Austin in the playoff pecking order. Arioka says, I really don't want the Lakers going back to playing that awful ISO ball with AR and Luka. They better let LeBron play point forward and lead the team to get others involved. I think, again, that LeBron is going to lead the team in usage and scoring and probably assists as well. So I think it will change. If Luka returns, I've made this distinction already between Luka and Austin. I think with Austin, it's more of you bring him off the bench, you ease him back in, and that's what they've done. Luka's not come off the bench once this season. I do not expect Luka to come off the bench. He's too good, too important. So I think if Luka comes back, there will be a shift more to Luka ball. But I think it will look a bit more like the middle portion of the season when Austin was out, or when Austin was in a lesser role, and it's more Luka, LeBron, Austin in terms of the hierarchy. But I think, one of the things I talked about around the time when those guys went out, and we saw what this looked like without them, was that it was unfortunate because LeBron always ramps up progressively throughout the course of the season. He's always ramping up towards the playoffs, and to expect a certain standard of excellence from LeBron in the postseason. He's done it year after year. It's just an annual tradition with him. He has compared it to cycling in terms of ramping up the gears, gear 4, gear 5, gear 6, etc. That's what he does. And that's why LeBron teams tend to close the regular season strong, tend to enter the playoffs with some momentum. And then you look at his numbers, he's always as good, if not better, in the postseason. So we've seen that already, aside from a bit of a stinker in game 4, though I think a lot of that was fatigue related. But I said that the sad thing was not seeing this version of LeBron with Luka and Austin. I think we'll get there with Austin, but we'll see if Luka is able to return and how competitive LA can be in round 2 versus OKC. Tommy Gold notes, Luke will play better at home. He wasn't good on the road. I agree. And I think some of the Luke discourse went a little far in terms of just, I mean, we'll see how Austin plays, right? But I think Luke is a really, really good role player. And I think he is someone that the Lakers should try to keep. But, I think it got a little ahead of itself after the first couple games, whereas I think the 4-game sample we have is a more indicative. And look, he's basically shooting 50%, and averaging 17 points a game. So he's had a great series. I think it's again, kind of the 4-game sample is more indicative of, or more reflective of who he is. I mean, he's someone that has struggled with the increased physicality from them in games 3 and 4, but I think he will bounce back in game 5. And this is basically what I'm getting at from Mr. T. Says, I think these last 2 games showed why Luke is a role player, not a star, which is perfectly fine. I think that's the perfect way to put it. He looked like a star in the first couple games, and then he looked like a role player the next couple games. And I think he is somewhere in between those two realities, more so on the role player side. But I think he's a really good role player who has been typecast as just a shooter for most of his career. And we saw he can do more than that. At the same time, I think we're also seeing when you have more time to game plan for him, I also think he's probably been the guy more so than even LeBron and Marcus, who has started to be fatigued and kind of lose his legs a bit in this series, because he has typically been a guy in the 20s and maybe upwards of low 30s, but he was averaging 41 minutes going into game 4, and then everyone's minutes were lower in game 4 just because of the result. But I think he's a really good player, and I think he is a guy that the Lakers should do what they can to retain this summer. But I think somewhere in between the games 1 and games 2 and games 3 and games 4 version of him is, I think, more the reality of where he's at. Again, Tommy Gold, yeah, we should keep him, but people want to give him 30. Again, I think it went people say he should replace Austin, that he's better than Austin, that he should be making $30 million. I think it went a little bit too far. Darian, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Buha. What tactical changes would you make to close this out? I feel like you can't have Şengün and Amen both go off. Amen's athleticism really hurt us last game. Yes. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you might have missed that. So I will quickly rehash the points I made. I think specifically with both of those guys, I think you just have to send more, in general, I think the Lakers need to play with more force, more physicality, more focus, more aggression. There was a lack of urgency and fatigue in game 4 that I think compounded into what game 4 turned out to be. So assuming LA is a little bit more well rested and has more juice in game 5. It's a home game. The crowd's behind them. Role players tend to play better at home. Let's just assume like they're coming off. They lost the game. Houston's been talking crap in the media. There's some motivating factors here. Like close the series out, get a break. OKC already swept their series. They already won. They're prepping for both teams technically, but we know they're prepping for the Lakers. It's in the Lakers' best interest to close this out. Don't extend the series, because even if you, let's just say they lose game 5, but they win in 6, like on the surface, it's like, okay, well, all right, you just played an extra game, but you play an extra game, you are risking additional fatigue going, because it's going to be a quick turnaround for the OKC series. I think there's this notion out there that like they have all this time off until the OKC series. Like the OKC series is going to start this weekend. If it goes 7, it will not start obviously this week because game 7 would be Sunday. But assuming the Lakers close us out in 5 or 6, it's going to be starting. It could potentially start. I think Sunday might be a little quick for a game 6 on a Friday, but maybe Monday. Like I think it's going to be a relatively quick turnaround. If this goes 6 or 7, it'll be like 2 or 3 days after whether the series ends in 6 or 7 in terms of when they play OKC. If it ends tomorrow, I think they'll have 4 or 5 days in between. But I think there's been a little bit of a misguided notion of like Lakers should drag out the series and it'll push it back. I don't think it's really going to push it back. I think they're going to be trying to get this OKC series started as soon as possible and potentially as soon as the end of this week, if not the very beginning of next week, like Monday or Tuesday. So I would bet on Sunday to Tuesday, somewhere in there being when the OKC series starts. And it depends on when this series ends, of course. But I think the big thing with Şengün is swarming him and trying to attack from behind. I think he's been able to just be like a battering ram and just pushing through the Lakers defense. And it's very much like when he has the ball, he is just looking to do, back you down, hit you with the forearm, hit you with the elbow, and do his little shifty, herky-jerky moves. But I think the Lakers could do a better job. I think Houston's done a better job of spacing in those situations. And if you watch it, like they start to relocate as Şengün is making his moves. But if you're the Lakers, I think the second he turns his back to whoever's the closest defender, that guy needs to be digging down and poking at the ball and trying to double him from behind. With Amen, I think it's got to be, I talked about, they've been setting the screens lower and lower. And the thing with that is the Lakers are a lot of times going under, or even if they're switching, it's almost like a kind of like a drop switch, and they're still not really at the level. And so it's allowing Amen to get the runway of get a couple dribbles under his belt, pick up some steam. Then they're switching the action because it's a lot of screens for him. Like that's sometimes it's an ISO. He might get someone switched out and he's able to attack them off the dribble. But a lot of times what's happening is he's coming off of these elbow or middle of the floor pick and rolls, and they're setting them lower and lower. He's able to get some steam, go downhill, and then the big is either picking him up too late, or the guard or the primary guy guarding him is trying to go under that and then pick him up. And at that point, he's already full force toward the rim. So I think the Lakers have to do a better job of, if they're going to set the screens that low, I don't think you go as under, I don't think you should go under at that point. Like he's also hit several pull up mid-range jumpers around the free throw line. Like I think you can live with that to a degree, but it also gets him in a certain rhythm. So I think the Lakers at that point, if it's DA or Jackson, if it's like Thompson and Şengün, then DA or Jackson has to switch out. If it's a like size player, because sometimes it'll be a Kogi, Eason, like they might try to get Luke in the mix. They might try to get whoever in the mix. In that case, like that player just has to pick him up and not be letting like Marcus or someone go under to then try and catch him on the other side. So I think like there's one play that stood out that I think it was Şengün and DA expect like Rui took the under and tried to pick him up on the other side, but at that point he got downhill and he just glided past Rui for the layup. So it's like I think the Lakers got to be tighter with that in terms of I would really just in general prioritize protecting the paint. And Houston's been getting far too comfortable in the paint, in my opinion. And like, yes, they've started to hit some jumpers. The 3-point shot has been better for several guys. Eason, Holiday, Shepherd, Jabari had a rough game 4, but had a really good game 3. Like they're trying to balance out the paint versus the 3-point line. But I think with these two guys in particular, and these are their two best players with KD out, it's got to be, to quote Stan Van Gundy, form a bleeping wall, and it's got to be multiple guys in the paint. And if Şengün's going to score on 4 dudes, he's going to score on 4 dudes. If Amen Thompson is going to midair glide past 2 guys and both guys are there with their hands up, verticality style, like, so be it, right? But I think the Lakers got way too lax with their attack against both, and it was too much. Jackson should never be one-on-one against Şengün. That's a mismatch. We've seen that time and time again throughout the series. You need to send more help. Even DA, I was more comfortable with it, and he has had some really good possessions against Şengün, but I think there's also this element of Şengün kind of bashing the first line of the Lakers defense, and then that also allows guys to get offensive rebounds or cuts, and then if there is someone not looking, he throws a little dump-off pass to a cutter or something. So I think there needs to be far more attention on him, particularly from behind, and then with Amen, it's got to be meeting his force with force. You do those two things, I think the Lakers can slow them down enough to win the game. Your boy Rich, thank you for the super chat. Have you changed your opinion on any free agents or restricted free agents based on their play this postseason? Yeah, I mean, I would say, so on the RFA front, I mean, the guy that's been the biggest dropper in the playoffs so far has been Jalen Duren. And we talked about it today on Lakers Collective. I'm not quite as low on him as Jason is. I'm not sure where Trevor is exactly, but I think I might even be a little bit higher on him too. I think the one thing with Duren that we have to remember is that he's 22 years old and this is his 3rd postseason. And yes, it is discouraging to say the least, like what we've seen from him these first few games of this series. And we've seen when he does not have a clear physical advantage against the counterpoint a counterpart, that there is a bit of a limitation with him. At the same time, I think Jason compared him basically to a bigger, stronger Jackson, who's like a much better screener, but kind of similarly limited offensively. I think he's got a little bit more to his game than that in terms of the DHOs. He did improve as a guy who could, fake a DHO and drive, or even some of the little bit of progress with his jumper that we saw throughout the course of the season. Now, that has not materialized in the playoffs, and this is the most important part of the season. So it is going to affect potentially his value this summer. But I would say I'm not out on Duren. I don't feel as comfortable paying him. I'm probably out on him at like $40 million, which is the way that it looked like. I mean, he's going to make an All-NBA team. He's going to be All-NBA, I think most likely 3rd team. He finished 11th in Defensive Player of the Year. He has not been a top 11 defender in the playoffs, but I think there was enough there in the regular season that I don't want to. And to me, the big thing is just that he's so young. Like, I don't want to write him off entirely and be like, stamp him with like, this is who Jalen Duren is. This is who he's going to be the rest of his career. I think if you get him in a situation with Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves and LeBron, and he's getting the looks that DA's been getting all season and that Jackson's been getting all season. He's a better rebounder than either one of those guys. I think he's a better rim protector than either one of those guys. I mean, he's just physically stronger and more imposing than either one of those guys. And I guess with him, like, definitely it's still in at 30, 35 is a little, I think I'd probably do it, but I wouldn't feel great about it necessarily. But you also have to look at it. It's going to be weird if Detroit loses in round 1, which it is trending that way, down 3-1, though I think the Franz Wagner injury potentially opens the door for the 3-1 comeback for them. If they lose in round 1, but Jalen Duren makes All-NBA 3rd team, he finished 2nd in most improved. It's this weird, like, how much do you weigh? And you obviously have to weigh the playoffs as much, if not more, but I don't think it erases everything he did during the regular season. And also the context of he's 22, he's only played 4 years. I think the 25-year-old year 7 Jalen Duren is going to be a much better player on both sides of the ball. And he just has certain physical gifts that you can't teach. And I think will continue to grow with a Luka and Austin moving forward. So I would say Duren is the guy who's taken the biggest hit of the restricted free agents. Peyton Watson's kind of just taking a hit just by not being available, but I still think, I've made the point that it's actually, if his value takes a hit, that benefits Denver, because then they could just re-sign him on a lower figure, or at least he signs an offer sheet, but then it gets matched and then he just stays in Denver. Tari Eason, I go back and forth with him. Definitely taking a hit from like the midway point of the regular season. I've talked about his shooting splits before, but the first, I think 2.5, 3 months of the season, he shot over 40% on threes. Final 3 months of the season, he shot under 30% on threes. So it was really a split season for Tari Eason from a shooting perspective. And watching him, I think especially the last couple of games, he's ramped it up defensively. I think he's done the best job on LeBron. Like LeBron still had his way against Tari Eason, but he's done the best job against LeBron that I think anyone on Houston has done. And there is like, he has some dog in him, right? Like he plays with a certain physicality, aggression. There's been several times where there's like multiple guys fighting for a rebound, fighting for a loose ball. And you just see him. I mean, there was one, I think it was like him, Vando, and I'm forgetting who the second Laker, but it was like him versus Vando and another Laker. And he's got 3 of them all in the ball. Tari Eason comes out with the ball in his hand. So there's like a physical component to him that I like, but the shooting mixed with some of the IQ stuff with him, some of the decision-making processing stuff with him, that gives me some pause. He obviously has had some injury stuff as well. So I think he's a guy that in the 15-ish million range, I'm cool with, because I just think if you're a 6'7" athletic forward / wing who can defend, it's kind of like back in the day, if you're a 7-foot setter who could walk and chew gum, you made a certain amount in the NBA. Like it's kind of like with the 3-and-D wing or kind of like the 2-way wing archetype. If you're 6'7" and you have a certain amount of athleticism, physicality, and defensive capability, and he's an inconsistent offensive player, but he can do some things offensively reasonably well, that player I think is going to walk into at least 15 million. So in that range, I'd be interested in him. Anything more, I'd probably pass on that. Let Houston or whoever else pay him more. And then Walker Kessler's still in at 30 to 35 million. I would pay a lot for Walker Kessler. In terms of other free agents, none off the top of Robert Williams is a guy who I'm really high on. Just depends on the price, and you have to factor in he's not going to be healthy. So I don't think you can make him your full-time starting center necessarily. I also like Mitchell Robinson, but he's another guy that you have to factor in. You're going to put him in bubble wrap for a little bit. But those would be some of the guys. I'd have to look more deeply at it, but I think the RFAs are the ones who are more interesting to me, and those are my current thoughts on those guys. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. 3-and-D, Dylan Brooks at age 31, making 21 million. You think Smart could ask for 17 to 20 million, 3 to 4 year contract after this playoffs? I just think somewhere out there, 1 to 2 teams might pay Smart 20 million, and we might lose him. So it's a good question. I think the difference, and I just want to make sure I'm not imagining this. There's a difference between them offensively. I know Smart is having a great series offensively, but Dylan Brooks has been a better shooter lately. That's not always been the case in his career, but there is an offensive element for his career. Dylan Brooks is averaging 15 points a game. He averaged 20 points a game this season. He has had multiple seasons above 16 points per game. And so I think one key difference here is that Dylan Brooks is also a bit bigger. So Dylan Brooks is in that 6'7" range where Marcus is 6'3". So you're getting, Dylan Brooks is pretty close. Like I know he thinks of himself as a fringe, like I wouldn't even say fringe. He probably thinks of himself as like an all NBA guy, but he is like very close to what actually is like a 3-and-D guy. Of now he could do way more offensively, but he does check the box of like league averages shooter who's also a really good multi-positional defender and is in that 6'6" to 6'8" range. Like he checks a lot of the boxes of what you want from that position. The difference was Smart, and I'm just confirming this now. Brooks has had a couple of injury-plagued seasons, but with the exception, I mean, this year he only played 56 games. The 3 previous seasons, he played 72 games or more. So he's a bit bigger. He's a better scorer, just like straight up pure scorer of the basketball. And he's also been healthier than Marcus Smart. So I lay out that case to kind of make the anti case for Marcus earning this much. Now, I think Marcus has been incredible all season. I think Marcus has been incredible in the playoffs. And he's clearly, I mean, I would actually say I think Marcus is better defensively than Dillon Brooks. I think Dillon Brooks has more of that reputation right now, but I think the impact that Marcus made for LA this season was just was awesome. So I could see Marcus maybe getting this range on a shorter deal. I think with his age and injury history, I mean, if you're giving him 4 years, 80 million, you're kind of recreating the DFS situation to a degree. If you're like, you're just playing with fire there of, I would not want to commit to Marcus for 4 years at that price. If it's 4 years, 40 million and you're paying him 10 million a year, but you're giving him the extra years just as security, that's a different situation. Maybe somewhere in the middle is 4 years, 60 million. I'm a little bit more open, but I would not want to give him 4 years. I think with Marcus, I'd either want to give a 2-year, $40 million deal, and that's like the 20 million, but it's on a 2-year deal, so it's shorter term. Or if you want 3 years, it's more somewhere in that 15-ish million range where it's 3 years, 45 million, right? Something like that, where it's a little bit more team friendly, but he's getting the extra year. So I think you can make a case for him in this range for sure. And obviously the point here we have to make with Brooks is like Brooks is on a value contract that I think if Brooks was actually a free agent, he'd be making at least 25, if not closer to 30 million. So Brooks, in that respect is actually, I think, on a bargain contract. And so if let's just say like Brooks is maybe close to 28, 30 million as a player, you could also then make the case for Marcus as like 20. But I think the big thing with Marcus is just the age and the injuries are the concern there. And can he consistently play 60 plus? Like you need at least 60 games from him every year, right? Like at a minimum, ideally. Can he play 60 plus games for the next 3 to 4 years? I don't have the answer to that, but I guess I'm trying to push back a little bit here in terms of him getting that from another team. Maybe he does. I think what he will get is he's going to get several teams pursuing him at that non-taxpayer MLE, which is in that 15, 16 range starting out. So he could get some 3-year 45 or 4-year 60, something like that type deals. And I think there'll be several, like any contender who has a non-taxpayer available and has like a wing or guard opening in their rotation should be pursuing Marcus. So I think there will be competition for his services. I think he's played himself into a bigger contract. I just think once you get into either the 4-year range or like 20 plus million, or even like 18 plus million, it's a bit of a gamble there. There is some risk just based on his injury history and his age and his mileage. He's had several deep playoff runs. I mean, Marcus has been with the exception of the last couple of years, Marcus has been an annual playoff guy. You look at, first couple of years was a first round and out guy, but then made Eastern Conference Finals 2017, Eastern Conference Finals 2018, Eastern Conference Finals 2020, Finals 2022, Eastern Conference Finals again in 2023. So he's made 4 Eastern Conference Finals and 1 Finals. And so that also adds up. He's played 112 playoff games. So he's played an extra season in his career, despite over an extra season, almost a season and a half at age 31. And technically he's 32 because he turned 32 back in March. So I think based on the age, the injury history, the additional mileage, the playoff stuff, I would put him a little bit lower than Brooks here in terms of the value. But I think the other thing I have to factor in is like who has money, right? So you can't just give him a $20 million contract offer out of nowhere. It's got to be, you have cap space to pay Marcus Smart. And if you look at the teams that have cap space, it's going to be Chicago, it's going to be Brooklyn, it's going to be Utah. The Clippers might be able to get some cap space, and there's a couple other teams that might be able to create some cap space depending on what moves they make. But for the most part, the cap space teams are bad teams, and that is an advantage for the Lakers, not only with Marcus, but with some of the other key free agents. If those players are looking for paydays from a good team, the Lakers are on the very short list. I mean, and they're on the very short list, but they're also at the top in terms of most cap space among good teams. So that's where the Lakers have an advantage here. So I would say with Marcus, I do think he is playing his way into that 15 to 18 range right now. And I would say like the higher the dollar amount annually, the shorter the contract. The lower the dollar amount, the longer the contract. It's going to be on him. Does he want like a 2 or 3 year deal, or does he want like a 4-year deal? But then there's a difference there, I think, in terms of the overall annual value. But I mean, market, I'm with you though. I like there should be some fear in some team trying to, like, if the Lakers are like, we're going to pay him $12 million, good luck. I don't think you're keeping Marcus Smart for $12 million a year. I think he's played his way into that non-taxpayer full mid-level at a minimum from other teams. And then if you're the Lakers, like, you can come in and be like, hey, we'll give you 3 years, $51 million. And now you're paying him 17 a year. And that's more than the non-taxpayer, but it's also a little bit of a shorter term deal. And it's not quite at the 20 plus million. Jamie, thank you for the super chat. Braun masterclass incoming. Braun hasn't had that 30 plus point explosion game yet. And I know he knows game 5 is the time. 2 days rest and a W gets you 4 to 5 days before round 2. I'm with you. I think LeBron's going to have a great game 5, especially coming off of, it's like everything you said, where he hasn't had the 30-point game yet. He knows how important game 5 is. And he's coming off of, I think, arguably his worst game of the season in game 4. And he owned that after the game. He took accountability for it. He said it started with him and his turnovers. So giving LeBron a couple days to stew with the bad taste of not having a good game, I think we will see a locked-in version of him, and as good, if not better, than the first couple games of the series. Rip Van Winkle, thank you for the super chat. Can you imagine the discourse if LA blows a 3-0 lead? And do you think Luka's learning anything from LBJ, especially from sidelines this playoffs? If so, what? I mean, the discourse if the Lakers blow a 3-0 lead is going to be, because all reason and context will be gone, because like on paper, right? I think we have, when we talk about a series, especially if you blow a series, now 3-0 lead is its own thing just because it's never happened before, right? So it would be this unprecedented blown series where there would be some crow on the Lakers just collectively if you blow a 3-0 lead and lose 4 times in a row. But I think what many people would gloss over would be 9 out of 10 people were picking the Rockets to win this series. The Rockets were minus 900 favorites to win the series. They have been favored in every single game up until now, game 5. The Lakers are slight favorites for the first time. So by everyone's expectations, the Rockets were supposed to win this series. The Rockets were heavy favorites. The Rockets should win this in 4 or 5. And so like the Lakers got out to the 3-0 lead, and Houston had their massive collapse down the stretch of game 3. But not to justify if the Lakers blew a 3-0 lead, but I think if that were to happen, an important element, in my opinion, would be like, well, a lot of people thought Houston was supposed to win this, and maybe it didn't go the way that you anticipated in terms of LA winning the first 3, Houston winning the next 4. But like, I think what the more justifiable or excusable blown lead is when the favorite underperforms in the series and then comes back to win it. I think where the blown lead becomes more problematic is when you're the favorite and you blow the lead. And then it's like, well, not only did you blow a lead, you lost to an inferior team. That said, I do not anticipate the Lakers blowing a 3-0 lead. I think they're going to win tomorrow. If they don't win tomorrow, I think they'll win in 6. And of course, if it got to 7, that's when the pressure's high and there's that, like, what happens if they do blow this and become the first team? But I mean, the Lakers have controlled. They were clearly the better team for the first 10 quarters of the series. They're up 3-0. I mean, or they were up 3-0. They're up 3-1. Like, they've been the better team up to this point. But it would be out of control. I mean, I'll say this. Like, I guess Luka would probably escape criticism just because he's injured. Austin might get some criticism for, especially if he returns and does not play well. LeBron would get the most criticism. Like, there'd be people making the cases on national shows and podcasts that LeBron's legacy, like, this is a massive hit for his legacy. This is why he's not Jordan. This is like, that stuff would be coming. So, it would be, the discourse would be insane. It would, like, Denver and Jokic have been going through it the last couple of days in the media, coming off of the weekend. This would blow that out of the water by like times 10. This would be some of the nastiest discourse you've ever seen if the Lakers blow a 3-0 lead against Houston. And then in terms of Luka learning anything from LeBron, it's tough to say because we haven't talked to Luka, right? And it would be great to hear from him directly. But I think there is something to, as I talked about a little bit earlier, like LeBron's pace throughout the season and ramping up in the playoffs and just playing his best basketball of the season, typically in the postseason. But I mean, you could also say Luka's a playoff riser as well. And his teams have tended to outperform expectations or outperform in series. And he has tended to be a playoff riser with his production. So I don't know. I mean, I guess you could maybe point to like the way the Lakers offense did look the first couple of games. I think it was just beautiful to watch, right? And there was an element of getting everybody involved and the ball movement, and that's kind of gone away a little bit the last couple of games as LA's been in an extended rut. But I just think they do have there's a lot of similarities between LeBron and Luka, and LeBron has talked about how much he loves Luka's game. This is even before they were teammates, but like he would say Luka was his favorite player to watch in the league. Luka's talked about LeBron's impact on him and growing up and being such a big, LeBron fan. And also, I mean, there's just like some natural apex predator wing size guys who are like point guards on offense, but wings and forwards defensively. There are some natural similarities between the two, but they obviously go about it in two totally different ways in terms of how they attack and what their approach is. And I've talked about, I think with LeBron, it's a little bit more balanced, and it's more like, what does the matchup dictate and how is the defense playing me? I'm going to attack this way. With Luka, it's more, I'm coming out trying to land the haymakers early, and then you're now going to sell out, trap me, throw more attention, and now I'm going to feed my teammates. So two different approaches. Maybe seeing some of the success the Lakers have had, Luka entertains LeBron's approach more, but I think like Luka is who he is, LeBron is who he is. They both go about it in somewhat similar, but also different ways, and I don't necessarily think that's going to change. But I mean, there's been some stuff behind the scenes with LeBron being more of a vocal leader now because he is the number one option, and with those guys out, like they needed somebody to step up more, and I think LeBron has done that. So maybe there's some but I don't know. I mean, at this point, like I don't really think Luka's learning much from him, because I think at this point, Luka, I don't think he needs to necessarily learn too much. I think there are some tweaks with his game that he could implement, but I mean, they also went through the playoffs last year together. So I think he's seen LeBron's preparation, how LeBron approaches things. Like I don't really have a great answer to that. Scrate, thank you for the super chat. Let's go Lakers, hashtag late night gang. Shout out to Scrate. Shout out to the late night gang. And yeah, would love to have things wrap up tomorrow, get my prep in immediately starting Thursday, do a preview pod for OKC on Friday, and get into that series by the end of the week. Peter, shout out to Peter. Thank you for the super chat. Do you think Detroit offers during 5-year 287 million max with All NBA? I'm gonna do some quick math here with my handy dandy calculator. 287 is a lot. 57.4 million. That is so much money, and part of that is, as you said, the Supermax with the All NBA. I mean, it's tough to justify paying him $57 million coming off of this playoff series. I don't want to rule it out, but you also have to remember that I don't remember the exact contract that they. I'm looking it up right now, but remember they had already kind of been at an impasse with his contract previously, or like with his prior extension. I don't know what it was. I'm not finding it right now. I mean, so yeah, they didn't land an extension in October, and at the time, it was expected to be around a 5-year, $185 million deal, and Detroit did not feel comfortable with that. I don't know that. I think he's earned more than that, but I don't know that. Well, it's tough. It's tough. It goes back to the conversation we were having earlier with Duren, where it's like, so I guess if he's 40, I was saying I don't feel great about paying him potentially like $40 million if I'm the Lakers, also factoring in their cap space. I guess if you had more cap space, it's a different situation and you can create more. But if you're signing Duren, and I'm bringing up the Lakers here just as comparison to sort of where I was at with him a little bit earlier in the show. If 40-ish million starting out, I guess that would be his starting point, and then it would technically increase a little bit. So let's just say it's like a 5-year, $220 million deal. I think the issue with that, in my opinion, especially for the Lakers, is just it's limiting. Like you could do Duren and LeBron, or Duren and Smart, Duren and Kennard, Duren and Rui, but you're now losing a few players. Maybe one of those guys can fit into the room exception, but you're losing like multiple players, and you're really committing to Duren. And with what we've seen so far in this series, it's been problematic. Now, the counterpoint I made was that he's 22, he's in year 4, third postseason trip. I would be shocked if the 25-year-old Duren or the 27-year-old Duren is not a much better player on both sides of the ball and a much more reliable player and closer to the regular season version of him, but in a playoff format. So 287 is now, again, that's a $57 million annual. So I would assume that's starting out in the high 40s and then building up from there. I think that's a little high. Maybe he gets somewhere in the mid 200s. Maybe he gets 240, 250. Even that's kind of high. I mean, I don't know. If you're Detroit, like you were the 1 seed, you won 60 games, you had this great regular season, but if you lose in 5 or 6 or even 7 to an 8 seed in round 1, and Duren is at the center of it in terms of underperforming and just not being at the level you need him to be, I think it's tough to then turn around and be like, here's $290 million. So I think he's going to clear 200, and he'll probably clear 220. And I mean, the way these things go is the guy typically gets the money and then they figure it out. And that's, part of the point I've made with Austin before. So I think he'll get somewhere in the mid 200s, but 287, I think might be off the table if, even with him making All NBA, him being second most improved, 11th in defensive player of the year, I doubt he makes an all defensive team, but he'll get some all defense votes. Even with all that context, I think that the playoffs are too important. But also, Peter, I got a note. You're giving me a lot of crap for not being as high on Detroit as you were. And, I think that's aged pretty well. Now, I did have them in the conference finals, which that's not aging well. But, Detroit's in a tough spot. Smoothie P says, I would take Duren all day easy. He's going to learn from this experience. I'm a little bit more on this side of the ledger than the other side. But there's a difference between taking Duren and taking Duren at nearly $300 million, right? Like there's a gap there. And then Keon Park says Duren equals younger DA. I think I can see a little bit of that. I do think he's tougher than DA. To me, DA is much more of a finesse player than Duren, or at least has been more of a finesse player throughout his career. I think he's been more physical this year than he had the last few years, but I would say I do think there's a mentality difference between the two, but certainly Duren has not performed at the level you want. And then Keon Park also notes Phoenix DA also had experience. So yeah, I mean, he had the early run to the finals in 2021. Shawnee says, does Duren have motor issues? The weird thing is like not really in the regular season. I would classify him as a high motor player who, for lack of a better term, is like got some shit to his game. And he's also very physically imposing. And like, he's on the short list of guys like you would not want to fight in the NBA, right? Like Detroit's got several of those guys, including Isaiah Stewart, who might be number one on the list overall, but he's a big dude and he's an intimidating dude. But yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing has been Wendell Carter has been able to match him physically, if not even just push him around, and he's been neutralized. And we've seen his switching onto Paolo and Franz and some of their ball handlers. He's not been as successful as he was with some of that in the regular season. The rebounding numbers have been down, so he's just not been as impactful or effective in the postseason. But it's still just his third postseason series. He's 22 years old. I do want to keep a big picture here where I think especially for big men sometimes hit their development stride a little bit later. And I think about just going back, like looking at the last like 25 years, think about a guy like Tyson Chandler. And when Tyson Chandler didn't really hit his stride as like what he became until like late 20s. And similarly, DeAndre Jordan was another guy. And there are some general differences between those three. I think Chandler and Jordan were a little bit more similar in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, but Duren is of that mold of pick and roll big, rim runner, rebounder, rim protector. I don't think he's as mobile as either one of those guys was defensively, but I also think he's stronger than either one of those guys ever was. So there's some trade-offs between their games, but I just think about those two guys as like these young, springy project bigs who showed flashes of development and then kind of like mid 20s hit a certain level and then late 20s went to a different level. And with Tyson Chandler, I mean, he was the starting center on a championship team, won a defensive player of the year. DeAndre Jordan was an all-star, an Olympian. Chandler was an Olympian as well. And so I think not to necessarily say that Duren is like those guys, although Duren is going to make a third team All-NBA in his fourth season. Like he's actually ahead of those guys technically based on where each of them was at this point of their careers. But I do think there's something with big men needing to learn the ropes a bit, and it's not always a linear process. And it does, that's the optimistic look. The pessimistic look is like, he's been a liability at times in this series. It's a 60-win team about to blow a first-round series to an 8 seed that was in the play-in tournament and didn't look that good in the play-in, and didn't look that good in the first game. Then you had the blowout over Charlotte. But yeah, I mean, but I would not classify him as a motor. I think that the motor hasn't been as revved up in the playoffs, which is concerning. But I don't have as many motor questions with him. Then going to go a few more minutes here. Reeks Martinez, thank you for the super chat. If you can make one move this summer to sign a player or trade for a player, what would you do to give us a real chance next year? My top guy in terms of... So there are guys I really like on the trade market. It's just tough to definitively say who's available, right? So I have less clarity right now. But if you want... I'll give you one of each, right? So I'll give you a couple. From the free agency side, I would say Walker Kessler would be my top target. I think Walker Kessler is exactly the type of player that the Lakers need at the center spot. And he's young. He's already one of the best rim protectors in the league. He's already one of the best rebounders in the league. I think he has made the most out of a pretty limited ball handling and playmaking situation in Utah, and giving him Luka as the primary ball handler and playmaker, and then Austin as the secondary ball handler and playmaker with him in pick and rolls. I just think if you give him DA's shot diet plus the rebounding and rim protection that you get from him, I think, I mean, to me, the comparison that's been out there since he was drafted was Rudy Gobert. But I think a big difference between him and Rudy Gobert is I think he's got better hands, and I think he's got better finishing around the rim than Rudy Gobert. So if you can get, and look, maybe he doesn't, I would say Rudy was a better defender at this point than Kessler was. So maybe he's 85 to 90% of Rudy Gobert on defense, but then he's also 15 to 20% better than Gobert on offense. And I would take that trade-off, because at times I actually think Gobert's offense has been more the issue keeping him on the floor rather than the defense. I think people remember like the 2021 series with the Clippers, but I think it's more so like, go back to last series with the Lakers. Outside of game 5, he was fumbling passes. He was missing layups. Like, the Lakers could go small and hold their ground against Gobert. But so I think with Kessler, that would be the main person I would want. If you could wave a magic wand and say you get any free agent right now to be a Laker, I would pick Walker Kessler. A close number 2 would be Peyton Watson. I don't know if it's the cleanest fit if you keep LeBron and you go LeBron, Watson, Austin, Luka, but I do think it could work. And I also think longer term, I would like Peyton Watson just as a foundational piece of the Lakers front court around Luka and Austin. Just a certain amount of defense, athleticism, and physical gifts. He's developed as a shooter. He's developed as a shot creator. There are some injury concerns with him, but I that would be like my number 2. If you want unrestricted free agents, I would say Mitchell Robinson and Robert Williams are the 2 guys that come to mind. And I think you could get them. It depends on the contract, right? Depends on the amount, but those are a couple of guys I think would be gettable. And then on the trade market, I would say the 2 guys I think will be available potentially are Lou Dort and Herb Jones. I would be interested in either one of those guys. Herb, I think it's going to cost you a pick. Lou Dort could be a casualty of OKC's cap situation. Now, if OKC wins the title, it's a little tricky there. I don't know what they do. Do they go in a different direction? But they're probably going to have to give up Lou Dort or Isaiah Hartenstein. And between the 2, I think Lou Dort is more expendable because they have more perimeter firepower than interior firepower. And if they lose, they lose Hartenstein, I just think it's going to be really tough. Like, Jalen Williams is not close to as good as him, the center Jalen Williams. And I think it's different with losing Dort when you have AJ Mitchell, Kayson Wallace, Alex Caruso, etc. You have more guys who could step into that role. So I would say those are like the 6 guys that right now, like a couple unrestricted, couple restricted, couple trade targets. I would take any of those 6 on the team. Obviously, the unrestricted guys I think are far more gettable than the restricted or the trade guys. But give me 2 of those 6, and I would be really happy going into next season. Hands of Stone 32 says I'd take Lou Dort over Herb. He is battle tested and proven in a way that Herb isn't, and the shooting comes and goes, but so does the shooting with Herb Jones. Looking at it, Lou's been pretty healthy. Start of his career was not as healthy, but the last 4 years has been 69 games or more. And yeah, in the playoffs, he's shooting 34% on 6.5 3-point attempts per game. I'm focusing on the shooting because I think that's like the one drawback with him, other than him occasionally being reckless with his feet and legs. And he's 26. So Herb is what? I think Herb is 26, 27. 27, yeah. Herb is... there's some similarities between the 2. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can make the case for Dort. Then Hands of Stone says, "Isn't Lou all defensive team?" Yeah, he is. He annually is. I think there are all defense. Like, there's only 2 teams. It's only 10 players. There's going to be a few big men on there, so it's like 6 or 7 perimeter guys, and I don't think it's always reflective. I'm a little bit on the side of like I think Lou Dort's a little overrated, but I also think Herb Jones, you can make a case, is like slightly overrated. So I think that's close between them. Peter, thank you for the super chat, says Detroit wins in 7. Wagner injury / Suggs can't shoot. It's possible. It's possible. It would. I did a little bracket with my friends, so that would be that would be good for me because I had Detroit going to the conference finals in my bracket. MK9E. Thank you for the question. If you have to pay Duren or AR, who do you pay? Well, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pick between the two. Is the thing. The Lakers have the cap space to pull off both of them. Duren, I would say, was the better regular season player, but he is leaving much to be desired from a playoff perspective. So, in a vacuum, like if we're doing like a player ranking, I would have had Duren ahead of Austin. I would have had Duren, I think, ahead of Austin going into the playoffs, but like putting Austin's injury, like let's just say everyone's healthy. Just because he's an all-NBA guy. Like he was a top 5 center this season easily. And that's very valuable. But I do have some concern. Like if you're asking me, let's go back to the $287 million that Peter threw out. Would you rather pay Duren $60 million or Austin $40 million? I would rather pay Austin $40 million. So I guess factoring in the contract threshold, I would rather have Austin. Smooth61 asks, how do you come up with questions to ask players? So I would say that there's like some general low-hanging fruit questions, right? Of, you win the game, you lose the game. I would say there's a difference here in terms of like game questions and practice questions. So game questions are typically more game focused, and it's more about the result of the game, the player's individual performance, maybe a moment that stood out, a run, a stretch, something from the game or with the player. If they win, you have a little bit more leeway to ask bigger picture questions or questions kind of off the beaten path, so to speak. If they lose, obviously they're typically in a bad. It depends on the player. There's some guys like Austin, for example. You could kind of ask Austin whatever you want, and Austin's going to play ball. There are some guys that you ask them the wrong question after a loss, and they will give you a testy answer. They'll side eye you, whatever. So it just really depends on the player, and depends on your relationship with the player, and just what their disposition is after losses, and also just their kind of general respect with the media. So game questions, I think, are a little bit more straightforward. It depends on what, like if you're one of the first few questions, you have the easiest job because you're typically asking one of the most obvious questions. The further back you are in terms of the hierarchy of getting called on to ask a question, then it becomes a little bit trickier to, because I've had times where the fourth or fifth question, and it's like my top 3 questions are the first 3 questions that get asked. And then I'm like scrambling to be like, well, I want to ask this instead. So game questions, I think, are a little bit more straightforward in terms of they're more immediate. They're more the context of the game. Practice questions are all over the place because that's where you ask some of the stuff of like, you went to high school with this guy. Like what was it like competing with this guy in high school? Or this person said this or this, or just whatever question. If you're working on a story, working on something, you can ask the player in the practice scrum setting. So I think it depends on the context of, are you out of practice or are you out of game? And then that practice, just far more informal, far more free flowing, ask whatever. game, it's far more game dependent and also outcome dependent in like win or loss. That's going to influence the mood of the player. It's going to influence how you ask certain questions. So I also think there's an element here of knowing the guys and then knowing who likes to be asked what. And some guys like technical questions, some guys don't. So for example, I think that's kind of a little bit of a difference with Luka and LeBron. I think sometimes you could ask LeBron a technical question and he'll give you a little bit in terms of an answer. Sometimes he won't, but sometimes he will. With Luka, it's a little bit more straightforward. Luka's a very efficient speaker with the media, and Luka just kind of wants to answer the question and move on, right? So it really depends on the person and just how they typically answer certain questions, what mood they're in, the context of the setting. But I would say it's more art than science. But I think, again, like there's the general sort of what are the 3 to 4 main talking points per player coming off of a game? What are the 3 to 4 main talking points going into a practice? And then if you can ask one of those, you ask one of those. If not, then I'm always thinking about like backup questions to ask. But I think a big thing, not only within like what you ask, is also how you ask it, because the tone, the complexity of the question, like some guys want short questions, some guys are cool with longer questions. And it just really, it's very context based depending on the player and their mood. And like, there are guys where sometimes they're in a great mood and you get great stuff. Sometimes, like, I think DA is a guy who fluctuates a lot in his mood. Sometimes he's great with the media. Sometimes he's a little testier, a little shorter with the media, and you just never know what he's going to say. So it really depends on the player and the context. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. For all the players, trades, and free agency we want are just not obtainable, or we want just not unobtainable. Front office still needs to use $55 million on somebody, at least to keep our guys in summer, or keep the money and use during the season or next summer. Yes. So I think this is like the downside to the Lakers' plans here, or potential downside, is that you do need, I mean, there's a floor in terms of like a cap floor of you need to spend up to a certain amount. Now, the Lakers don't necessarily need to spend all the 55 to get there, because they also are going to have keeping Austin on his cap hold, Jackson on his cap hold. So there are other ways to reach that without even necessarily re-signing all your guys. But there's a scenario in which you could hit that 55. I mean, if LeBron hits, let's just say LeBron gets 20 to 25, and then Marcus gets 15, 17, 18, somewhere in there already, that's almost 40. Let's just say roughly around 40. Then, I mean, Rui, I think, is going to get 12 to 15 or so. Luke could also get in the same range. So, I mean, just with honestly 3 players and 3 incumbent players, you can quickly reach that 55 million. So I don't think that's a concern. I think the Lakers are going to hit it. I think the question, the bigger question for me, the more interesting question, is how do they prioritize these guys, and where, because again, to bring up a couple of earlier names, if they're going for a Walker Kessler, if they're going for a Jalen Duren, if they're going for a Peyton Watson, they're losing at least one, if not a couple of those guys. Like, getting one of those guys might cost you Luke Kennard and Rui. It might be, you get that guy, you get LeBron, you keep Marcus, you keep Austin and Jackson, and then you lose Luke and Rui. Like, I think that is in play here, depending on the level of free agent they get and how much that costs. Now, I think the goal for the Lakers will be, okay, can we dump Vando? Can we dump Jake? Can we dump Dalton? Can we create some more flexibility to keep some of these guys, and at least maybe you lose one of them, but you don't want to lose 2 of them. I think that is in play here, but they're going to, I think, easily get to that 55 million through the multiple free agents they have, because you can make a case that between, if you're actually paying LeBron, Marcus, Luke, and Rui, if you're factoring in like their value on the open market plus like the potential suitors and like what it would cost, I think it's over 55 million for those 4 guys. Now, maybe one of them is willing to take a slight pay cut for the room exception, which is around 9 million starting out. But barring that, I think it's already going to be tough to keep all four of those guys under 55 million, because you can make a case that those guys are worth like 60 to 70 million combined, depending on, again, kind of where those numbers fall and how they perform the rest of the playoffs. So yeah, they're going to easily blow through the 55, and they do need to spend at least to the floor. But when you factor in the cap space plus what Austin's going to make and what Jackson's going to make, I think they will easily get there. But the one thing with that, obviously, is like you just don't. I think it'd be disappointing if they just run it back, right? And there's other, maybe DA opts out, and that gives you some more flexibility, and you could keep some of those guys. Like if you get, let's say it is 55, but then DA opts out, that's now 63. So now you have even more room, and you maybe could keep all four of those guys. It really just depends. Or maybe DA opts out, then you also trade Vando or something, or Jake, and then you're now at 70 million or even into the 70s million wise, and now you could keep everybody, plus maybe add one person and keep Austin, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think they're going to hit the 55 easily. I'm not concerned with that. I am just concerned with, to your first point, if you don't get, I mean, there's a realistic scenario here in which Peyton Watson stays in Denver, Walker Kessler stays in Utah, Jalen Duren stays in Detroit, Tari Eason maybe even stays in Houston. And so you miss out on all the restricted free agents, which I think should be the default assumption here. Maybe Mitchell Robinson stays in New York. Robert Williams, okay, maybe you could add him, but like I would like him more as a backup than a starter. And then all of a sudden I don't know, like there's no guarantee that you're getting someone via trade. I mean, you are going to have to put up a competitive offer most likely, depending on the context, depending on who it is. But yeah, I mean, that's more the downside, but I do think the Lakers will add someone of note. It's just a matter of, can you add maybe a couple people of note, and also who are you prioritizing keeping? Who are you okay losing? And how does that all shake out? But with all that said, I'm going to wrap here. Appreciate you all for rocking with me. I will be back tomorrow after Game 5. I will be there. So it's going to probably be a late night. I believe, I don't even know what time the game starts. It's a 7:00 game. Okay, so 9:30. Yeah, I probably will be going live around 11:30. I would assume tentatively. So 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. So yeah, about 2 hours or so after the game. So yeah, it's gonna be a late night tomorrow. But looking forward to Game 5. As we talked about earlier, Game 4 rewatch was a bit rough, but I think the Lakers should be doing a lot of what they did through the first 3 games. They play harder. They have more juice, rested legs. I think they should pull this thing out in 5. But with all that said, for those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those on listening on audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, day, wherever. And I will talk to you all tomorrow.